Facebook, and YouTube, but listen to our audio only, where you'll get shows like Cheryl Underwood and Blues Time in the City. You can pick us up at www.kuaw.org or go to the TuneIn app and search KUAW. Listen to us. We're on 24 hours a day. That's KUAW Radio, Kansas City's global community radio station. And this is what you hear every day from noon till 2. Don't miss the Cheryl Underwood Show.
Where you at, baby?
Sure, I'm at my first alma mater, Clark Atlanta University in Atlanta, Georgia. CAU was the first HBCU in the southern United States. Shout out to our affiliate ATL Talks in Atlanta, Georgia, and everyone getting out there to vote for those 2 Senate seats. We love you.
That's what I'm talking.
You are listening to KUAW Radio, home of the all-new Jamal Bakes Show, and I'm Jamal Bakes, and thank you so very much for listening to the station bringing you talk, news, entertainment that you won't get anywhere else. KUAWN, of and about our community.
This is the last weekend before Christmas, and on Blues Time in the City, we're wrapping up our all Christmas blues and Southern Soul program.
Gene Bailey.
We have a very special guest that you will definitely enjoy, and we'll hear from some of the artists that sing the Christmas blues. Join me, Gene Bailey, for Blues Time in the City this weekend before Christmas, right here.
This is comedian Janelle Banks, and you are listening to KUAW, Kansas City.
KUAW listeners, this is Carl Boyd for Wave Your Grades, coming to you every Saturday from 1 until 2 p.m. right here on KUAW. This program features American students striving for excellence in honor of our troops and American veterans, encouraging American students. Please join us every Saturday from 1 until 2 p.m. right here. Good afternoon, and thank you once again for listening in to Wave Your Grades on KUAW.org. My name is Carl Boyd. I am your civilian host of Wave Your Grades, a program that asks American students to strive for excellence in honor of our troops and features our veteran guests and students who are motivated by them. During the pandemic, and by the way, since I mentioned that, please wear your masks, wash your hands, observe proper distance, and those are just the big 3, but all things that make common sense as it relates to the pandemic. Please observe those protocols and just those things that will protect you and your loved ones and all with whom you come in contact. Again, Carl Boyd on KUAW.org. KUAW, founded by Louis George Walker, stands for knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And you will get plenty of that today from our very special guest, who happens to be a veteran, also a community leader, a person who is astute in politics and the social realm. His name is Pastor Michael Brooks, and I think that he is on the line with us. So let me say and ask for a response. Welcome, Pastor Michael Brooks.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd. Appreciate you having me with you today.
Thank you, and thank you so much for bestowing upon me the PhD I never earned.
Okay. I'm good for that. You learned to cover me.
Well, let me just say to you that in the little note that I sent via email, I indicated that I wanted to ask you to discuss a title from a Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. book, Where Do We Go From Here? And when I think about here, I suspect that the first thing is to define where here is, and then we'll go on to talk about from here to where. Pastor Michael Brooks, first thing, please give us what you would give as your background from, even if you want to go back to childhood to this time.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ooh, if I'm breaking up for you, I might indeed be breaking up for other listeners. So I will be asking if we can clear that up. I was asking for your personal background and just a summary from then until now.
Oh, okay. Well, the short, the short version. I was born and raised in Kansas City. Graduated from Central High School in 1980. 1980. That was 41 years this year. Actually, we celebrated our 40th reunion last year. Weren't able to because of COVID. But I left here in 1982. Joined the military. So I went into the Air Force in May of 1982 and served 10 years in the military until May of 1992. While there, started in the gospel ministry, so started preaching and then started pastoring down in Texas. My last station was Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas. So even after I got out, I stayed there. Became a drug and alcohol counselor and was also in ministry. So those two kind of went hand in hand together. And started pastoring a little church, Macedonia Baptist Church in Altus, Oklahoma, 1994, and did that from 1994 to 1998. At which time I moved back here to Kansas City in 98. Began working at Swope Health Center in the homeless department, so I got a real good picture of the homeless problem and the homeless population here in Kansas City. And then in 2000, Zion Grove Baptist Church called me to be the pastor, and I've been the pastor there now 20 years. This year will be 21 years.
Oh, wow.
So that's the short story, short version.
Okay. Now, one thing about that is, in as much as you've had a variety of experiences, that obviously helps as you minister to others. In that 5th or 6th grade class, young Michael Brooks saw himself as Pastor Michael Brooks or Councilman Michael Brooks, or perhaps you were to be the Patrick Mahomes before Patrick Mahomes. What were your aspirations and how did it turn in this direction?
Well, the real aspiration was more basketball. So that probably started around 7th, 8th grade in high school, junior high school.
Now you're talking.
But the summer before my senior year of high school, actually had a pretty serious knee injury that kind of precluded me from continuing that career. And so college was out the window, scholarships were out the window, so that's why the military became a viable option. I kind of knew I'd be in the ministry. I was born and raised in church, so I attended Canaan Missionary Baptist Church for my whole career until I got to be an older teenager and got to have a choice where I wanted to go. And of course, as most teenagers do, I chose not to go. So I was kind of out there and lost for a while, and that was another reason why the military was important. I needed to get my life together. But knew probably around 16, 17 that ministry was going to be important. And really joining the military was a way of running from that, because I really didn't want to be a preacher, to tell you the truth.
Well,
I had no desire to be a preacher. And just thought I'd find some other career, something else to do. And so if you know anything about God, you can run, but you can't hide. So
exactly.
Military, but he found me.
There are certain things that
Anchorage, Alaska, for me to sit still long enough to listen to him. So while I was there, I got back into the church and then also accepted my call into the ministry.
Just anecdotally, when you were in Anchorage, Alaska, was that realization during the dark months or the light months?
It was actually light months. I got there in the springtime. So,
all right.
It was just starting the light months. And so I appreciated that, because, again, it took me a while before I really decided to turn things around. So at the time, I was clubbing and partying and to go to the club at 10 and get out at 1 and the sun's still shining was okay with me.
Yeah.
So I was okay.
Well,
At work, 'cause I was like, where's the next party? The sun's not even gone down yet.
well, I guess
So, yeah, so that was the being there though. I think just being in that environment and that just how nature is in Alaska. I think being that close to that just gave me another impression of who God was as well.
Praise God. And KUAW.org. This is Wave Your Grades. My name is Carl Boyd. I'm your civilian host speaking to heroic veterans on Wave Your Grades, KUAW.org. And on this particular Saturday, January 30th, Pastor Michael Brooks. I began the program by saying that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. asked the question, where do we go from here? And Pastor Michael Brooks, if you would, can you kind of, before we talk about where we go from here, help us to understand where here is January 2021?
For me, I think the summary of where we are right now is just, I think, in the season of really being real and being honest about the condition of our country, the condition of our even our city and our state, and just how bad things I think have gotten over the last 4 years. I think there are a lot of people that were able to kind of be situationally ignorant to what was really going on. But after January 6th and after November 7th and the election and everything that happened as a result of that, I think we got a real good picture of what America looks like. It's extremely divided. It's just extremely divisive. And a lot of the things we've been fighting, even since King, seem to still be alive and well right now.
When I think back at my age and my peers, and someone might say, in the day what was going on, Reverend Sam Mann and I share a story. We were demonstrating against the Vietnam War at the Democratic National Convention in 1968. And if I talked about public accommodations, if I talked about voting rights, if I talked about school desegregation, redlining, those kinds of things, I could kind of paint a picture of what it was and then compare that to today. When Pastor Michael Brooks looks back on what was important in those developing years to what, well, I won't say compare, because we cannot compare today to any era in which we have lived.
Right.
But what were the kinds of things that were going on in your personal development?
Well, I think the one thing that really comes to mind is what's commonly called white flight from the urban core.
Mm-hmm.
And but we really coined it the right way. It really wasn't just white flight. I think black people got out as quickly as they could as well, and so that became I guess the measure of success. That if you had a good job or were making a certain income, the best thing for you to do is to get out of the neighborhood. And so we took our departure to the suburbs too, and so Grandview and Lee Summit and Blue Springs and all those areas, I think, began to see us come out there in droves, because I think we bought the same verbiage that if you're successful, you have to get out of the neighborhood. I think that depleted our community from a lot of educational knowledge and just professional knowledge, just people, again, who our children probably need to see on a regular basis that they really didn't see on a daily basis. When I was in grade school, we had doctors and lawyers and professionals staying right across the street from the elementary school until, again, that flight began. So just time frame wise, I was in kindergarten in 1968. In 1968, I went to Ladd Elementary School. When I went to that school in 68, it was very diverse. There were black and white kids. Matter of fact, it was probably more white than black at the time. So much so that what they taught us in gym class was how to square dance. So if you can make that, that was the lesson for the day. We had to learn how to do-si-do.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
By the time I was in the third grade, it was almost a predominantly black school. White families were being told to move out of the neighborhood in droves. One of my best friends, whose father was a doctor, and it was actually a mixed marriage. I think his father was white, his mother was black. But he was one of my best friends, stayed right across the street from school. And I remember him coming to school one day and saying, well, this is going to be my last day of school because we're moving. I was like, why are you moving? My dad just said, we've got to move. And so sure enough, they moved. And we saw a number of those similar things happen on a regular basis between 1960 1968 around to about 1970, 71. I think it's when it was fully in that area. So that's around 37th and Benton Boulevard, in that area. Between 35th and Benton to 39th and Benton, that's kind of the lad population. And so Benton Boulevard used to be the Ward Parkway of Kansas City. That's where a lot of big-time professionals used to live in those big houses lining Benton Boulevard. And so when blacks started coming in, they started moving out, and that's where you get to Country Club Plaza and all the things J.C. Nichols was able to do with Red Line and all the stuff that we hear about in history books now.
Pastor Michael Brooks, as you talk about 37th and Benton, my wife, wonderful Wanda, listening to the program now, is recalling, I'm assuming that she is recalling her family days on 37th and Montgall.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So you have a lad in common. And I'll ask you if you have in common my generation, those of us older, as it relates to a comparison between then and now, at least from my perspective. We did march, we did demonstrate. I was a 7th and 8th grade science teacher at a 99.9% black school where I was referred to as a militant teacher. I wasn't violent, I was outspoken. But in that movement, Pastor Michael Brooks, as bad as we might suggest things were, one of the things that we had was hope. And we thought that if we could actually get into the consciences of well-meaning white folks, that the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream might wake into reality.
Right.
I see that as a difference from then with all of that hope and the divisiveness we're experiencing now.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some major differences between then and now. I think one of the main ones, and again, it's just my perspective, is I'm not sure there's still a real clear line of what it is we're trying to achieve at this point. Back then, the civil rights movement was about equal access. It was about accommodations. It was about restaurants. It was about public transportation. So everybody's real clear on what the fight was.
Clarity.
Now that we have, some of us have achieved some measure of success, those fights are a little different. And so I'm not sure, even as a people, as a black people or brown people, we're always real clear on what it is. One, we're asking for and what it is success looks like, because we have gained some measure of success. And what happens now is the conversation needs to change between our individual success to a more overall systematic success, and how do we change some of the systems that continue to be oppressive and continue to be discriminative in their actions. And so although those systems were effective in the civil rights movement, I also believe there's some other systems that were put in place to counter some of the successes. So even just this past week, I heard about another neighborhood, and I forget where it was. I forget the state, and I apologize. But every minority in the neighborhood there was a letter put in the mailbox, and that we don't want any blacks and Asians or any Hispanics in this neighborhood. So although we've come a long way, that whole issue of housing and people being able to live where they want to live, although the law says it's true, in practice sometimes I think we still have ways to go.
Well, one of the things that I do to remember categorically some of the things I am concerned about, I use the acronym PEERS. PEERS in and of itself doesn't have significance except to just help me to remember these categories. One is politics, one is economics, one is education, one is religious or religion, and then the social sphere. So when I think about those things, and I hear Pastor Michael Brooks mention successes, if you would, among those, one or two, all, just one, politics, economics, education, religion, and the social sphere, where are we succeeding? Where are we lacking?
Well, I'm always going to be a proponent of the education sphere. I think that really is the equalizer. But I'm also at a point where we need to question even some of the things that we are teaching our kids. Our kids are being taught when it comes to education, that there are, certainly when it comes to Black history, we just weren't taught everything that we needed to know. And so re-educating ourselves as well as making sure our kids are getting a good education, a well-rounded education, and not just being taught to test and being taught to pass, that type of thing. I think that's still an area where we could have some successes. I still don't think it's a national goal as it relates to everyone having an equal education. I shouldn't have to move to the suburbs for my kid to get a good education. Education should be education no matter what school you walk into. I shouldn't have to pay for a private education at a private school for my kid to get a good education. There should be a standard for education when it comes to English, math, history. There should be a standard across the board, and that's just not the case. And I think that's one of the ways the systems kind of keep the equality from happening or equity from happening. We have different versions of what a quality education looks like. So that's one. I think we've all learned how powerful politics can be. I think some of us that have always been involved understand how powerful politics are. But when it comes to changing these systems, one of the ways they get changed is by putting people in office that are willing to make those changes. Some of the policies are not going to change without political will to make some of the changes. I was just before we got on, I was moved by the picture of a young Hispanic little girl who was reunited with her mother after being held at the border in cages for months. Those policy changes are what's going to be needed to really change how people act. So politics is extremely important. I think we've seen again how dangerous it can be, how divisive it can be. But we need the right people in the offices that can make some tough decisions on which way to go. And we won't always agree. I think that's the whole nature of democracy. We don't have to agree, but you need to know what it is you want, so you know what it looks like when it comes to your political representatives and who's in office and who's going to be able to change things to get them the way you think they need to be. So those two things are interesting. And then certainly because of what I do, religion is always going to be important.
Yes.
And I've challenged a number of groups that I work with for us taking a real close look at just our theological positions, period. For this nation to be as divisive as it is on the religious realm, it's really concerning to me that we can all be supposedly reading the same scripture, reading the same Bible and coming to two totally different conclusions as relates to what God would want in a time like this. Um, so all the way from the extreme religious right to the what's called the left, and I don't particularly like even category people in those two categories. But that's what we got to work with. I think there's some challenges we need to make to theology, because something's happening somewhere for that many individuals to believe in Scripture that the way the nation was going for the last 4 years was the right way. There's something wrong with that theology in my mind, and it's got to be challenged at some point.
If you will allow me, I take this liberty, and I pray that it is all right to do. But Reverend Bob Hill, Pastor Emeritus, and Pastor Michael Brooks have allowed me to be in on a conversation titled Shepherds Helping Shepherds. And one of the things that I have recognized in that Zoom meeting is it is a multi-faith assertion that we must be not only relevant but active. Is it all right for you to just talk for a minute about what that seeks to do?
Yes. So in its inception, the idea was trying to find a space where pastors or leaders or shepherds, as it's called, could support each other. Because in the midst of us always being helpers and all of us being individuals that are always helping people with their issues, it's not always comfortable spaces where we can talk about our own. And so that was the inception. That was the start last year, around February, March. And then, of course, in March, the pandemic hit. And so then it became more of a supportive group for all of us to talk about how we navigate the pandemic and how we can support each other in that. And so that's what it's turned into. So every week, almost for the last year now, be a year in March, every Friday. And as you said, these are religious leaders from all backgrounds, all faiths, from Jewish rabbis to Baptist ministers. So what I love about it is just that diverse, and even some white evangelicals who again are trying to navigate this space, because just like with any tag, you don't want to lump everybody in the same group. And so there are some extreme evangelicals, but there are also some that are trying to understand what's going on in their groups as well. And so it's a group that we just have some real honest conversations with no judgment, no right or wrong answers, really open-ended questions on what we can do, what can we do, how can we make things better. And the conversation just really is rich.
Now, one of the things that you helped me to see in that regard is the absolute necessity to accept that there may be people who see things differently than you, but having the faith wherewithal to respect the right of people to have what their views are and yet work together to help others.
And I think when it comes to religion, when it comes to faith, we've allowed those divides just because we have been willing to sit down across the table with other people that are not like us. It certainly is more comfortable to stay in your little circle, but I think it's even more beneficial if your circle expands to those who, again, may not necessarily believe what you believe, but certainly have faith in God, certainly have faith in how they practice religion, and have something to add to the conversation. And so I always appreciate the perspective of the rabbis and their understanding of the Torah and the first 4 books of the Old Testament and how astute they are. It really is impressive to me how they conclude, and the conclusions are not too far off from each other.
Exactly.
The basis of religion for all of them are pretty, in general, how you treat your respect for God, how you treat your fellow man, how you're supposed to do good to those who are poor and oppressed. That's a basic, just love in a nutshell. That we all have. Every religion has some component of love and righteousness in it. So how we practice becomes the dividing too, and I just don't think that needs to be a divide. We can still practice the way we practice, but be open to hear someone else's perspective when it comes to the scripture. So that's what I've appreciated about it. It really has enriched my thought process, as well as I've gained some friends that I would have gained had I not participated.
Yes, sir. As we are at the half hour of Wave Your Grades on KUAW.org, let me remind those who are listening that you are hearing the voice of Pastor Michael Brooks. Wave Your Grades is a program that comes on KUAW.org, emanating from the W.E.B. Du Bois Learning Center every Saturday, 1 p.m. until 2 p.m. We honor those who have served and are serving militarily in the United States of America, and we motivate students to strive for excellence in honor of those troops. It is indeed our honor this day to have Pastor Michael Brooks, who is indeed a military veteran and a faith leader in our community. Coming back to Pastor Brooks, let me indicate to you that one of the privileges that you point out that I am able to be in on when I am joining that circle, and you were talking about Jewish, quote, colleagues, unquote, as it were, not only from the standpoint of the Torah and those first 4 books as it relates to the Bible, but Pastor Michael Brooks, we are listening to people who can respond firsthand to those who deny the Holocaust.
Yeah, that was really interesting yesterday. Yeah, and because of it, and the need for that is so relevant because we are living, as it relates to what we're fighting now, this whole culture of fake news, bad news, lies becoming reality, all of that. That, we're 2 months away from the election, and you still have people saying that, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris didn't win. That, and it's just because it's repeated over and over again.
Exactly.
I made the joke as you said, when we started to called one of the colleagues doctor, and she said, "Well, I'm not a doctor yet." I said, "Well, this is where we're living in. You keep saying it long enough, it becomes true."
Absolutely.
That's the culture we're living in. That has been said so many times that people really start believing it, although there's no truth to it whatsoever.
Well, I'll tell you, much of that to which we are exposed is somewhat amusing, but then on the other hand, it is also dangerous.
Extremely dangerous. And I think that's what January 6th taught us. That again, there's nothing wrong with having different views. It's a democracy, so that's just how it's supposed to be. Matter of fact, it's the strength of the democracy is being able to challenge each other on our views and our points of view.
Yes.
But when that challenge becomes violent, when that challenge becomes so divisive, you're talking about taking people's lives and people lose their lives over that. I think there's no excuse for what happened. And for 5 people that have lost their lives because some people don't like the results of an election, you would think we're in a third world country somewhere.
Yes.
That we're not the superpower, that we're not the political and world superpower that we're supposed to be. And I really was interested in what the rest of the world thought they were seeing. If you hear some of the commentary on what they saw, you'll see we lost a whole lot of respect in the eyes of other nations and other national leaders who are not grateful that Biden is in office and he can, hopefully get us back to some semblance of normalcy when it comes to our participation on the world stage. but I certainly believe we lost a whole lot of credibility just because of that. And so, and then we learned also, again, as if our heads have been in the sand up till now, nobody can deny that we have some real major issues inside this country.
Without a
all
doubt.
Of our enemies are not terrorists coming from the outside, but we have insurrectionists on the inside that are just as dangerous as anyone that may come from the outside.
I'll tell you something that Wanda and I saw earlier today, and I thought I would mention it to you and ask you to comment on it. We are channel switchers, as many people are, to national news networks. And some of them lean more towards what we agree with. But one of those networks this morning featured an interview, and it is one that we turn to often because generally we are in agreement. But the hostess of this program had a Trump convert, someone who was pro-Trump, and now became a part of the Lincoln Project, is not for Trump. But she seemed to be mean-spirited towards the fact that he ever followed Trump in the first place. And I was just wondering how Pastor Michael Brooks feels we ought to treat our adversaries if we truly want to bring unity at some point.
Yeah, I think that's always a slippery slope. But I do believe, again, as our faith suggests, that anybody can be converted at any time.
Yes.
And so I don't condemn you because it's taken a long time for you to be converted. I'm just as happy for the 70-year-old to get saved as I am as for the 7-year-old to get saved. And I don't bash the 70-year-old because it took so long to come to Christ.
Thank you.
So I think we could use that same analogy when it comes to politics. I think, and I've been encouraged by a number of the Republicans who are saying now, and there are some, again, I think the discussion is what's important. And when you talk about news streams and news outlets, I think they thrive on controversy. And that's kind of how they expect it to go. So I don't expect much more from watching those things. I think they set it up so there is controversy. But the reality is, one, these individuals were supporting Trump, so you can't deny that.
Right.
So even after you get converted, there still may be some consequences to your previous actions.
No doubt.
And so although we champion and celebrate the change, we also warn individuals that just because you got saved doesn't mean everything's just going to be peaches and cream now. So I think there's some balance in all of that. But I certainly don't think we need to keep bashing people over the head because of their past. And I think that's one thing the church could do better and the world could do better at by not bashing people for what they used to be and celebrate what they are now. But again, it's news outlets. So again, I think they thrive on the controversy itself. And I'm not so sure we haven't learned that from the news when it comes to the faith community, that we thrive on the controversy rather than the convert. And we want to magnify the negative instead of celebrating the positive a lot.
It's coming from Pastor Michael Brooks, and one of the things that you make me mindful of as it relates to news ratings, viewership, listenership, it seems to compel them to make statements like this. There was a controversy between the House and the Senate, and we were looking to see who caved first. Now, why do you have to say we're looking for who caved first? Why can't you say we're looking to see where they agree?
And I think that's also, and people know that. I think that's also kind of feeds the divide.
Yes.
You don't want to be seen as somebody who's weak, as somebody that, as you said, caved in. And but at some point, I think the question that was raised even on the call yesterday, if we could just celebrate the things we agree upon.
Yes.
There's always going to be things we disagree upon. But we can just find some common ground and find some places where, regardless of what your party affiliation, regardless of what your religious tradition is, that we can just some basic human rights and basic human realities that we can agree upon. I think that's where we can pitch our tent and start really healing and fixing what has gone so wrong in the country. We're always going to have differences. If you want to magnify the differences, that's the space you want to be in. That's a choice. But I'd rather us start thinking about what are the things we have in common and how can we build on those and expand those. And
you and I both invoked the name of the Reverend Wallace Hartsfield Sr.
Mm-hmm.
And in this context, he had the occasion, I am told, to say to someone, some groups who were in disagreement, okay, we've talked about those things upon which we disagree. Is there one thing?
Yeah. Well, and I think we've allowed again, and this is not talking about anybody, because I think at some level we all, in a certain eye, have fallen into this space where if I disagree with you, I don't want to work with you on anything.
Right.
So, having been converted from that space.
Oh, good. Yes.
Over the last couple of years.
Yes.
The reality is we need everybody. And my hope and my prayer is that everybody succeeds. Everybody wins. Everybody feels as if they are prospering and moving forward. Even if it's someone that I may personally consider as an enemy, there's nothing in me that wants to see you fail, even if we disagree.
Thank you.
So at some level, and real maturity, I think, requires that. If we're going to use the principle of Jesus as our role model, he suggests you got to love your enemies if you want to be successful. You got to treat well those who treat you bad. And although that may be an awesome challenge and an awesome responsibility, it doesn't change what he expects of us. And so it certainly is a measure that you have to grow to. I'm not suggesting everybody's there, but we can also agree that that's the goal that God suggests that you got to get to.
Well,
I think until you can get to that part, you'll never really understand the message of Christ and the message of love in everybody.
Let me tell you why that is so very important and so significant coming from Pastor Michael Brooks this afternoon. When you say that this is an attitude that you have adopted lately, meaning within the past few years or so, whatever that might be, when Pastor Michael Brooks says, I am willing to admit that it took me a while, I pray that it would help any listener to see that if they are behind on that, it's never too late.
No, and I think again, it's and what I'm going to be taking our church through over the next month is a whole matter of just getting past your own trauma, getting past your own deficiencies. It has nothing to do with anybody else. It really has to do with you deciding that you want something better, that you want something different. And so being angry and bitter and upset really wasn't serving me very well. You know, I wasn't happy with me. And so,
wow.
And then, you know, you can't preach it on a regular basis and then not practice it. At some point, as preachers, as leaders, we've got to practice what we preach. And so I can't preach love the enemies if I'm not willing to do it myself. I can't preach looking past people's faults if I'm not willing to do it myself. And so, again, I can hang my hat on all the bad things that have happened and all the bad things people have done and hold that as a grudge. But that anger and that frustration can turn into bitterness. That bitterness turns you into a very miserable person. And I think somebody needs to be, and not necessarily I'm the only one, but I think people need to see the example of individuals being able to get past the past and move on to what God has for us in the future.
I'll tell you, I suspect that if I utter this, it comes out as a rhetorical question, and that is, has there ever been a more appropriate time to make that realization? And I wonder, Pastor Michael Brooks, as it relates to things physical where the pandemic is concerned, we are not going to Friendship Baptist Church. We are hearing from Pastor Terrence through our Zooms, through our computers, through those are the kinds of physical things. But in addition to that, as it relates to speaking with your congregation, what are some of the formidable challenges you've had since this pandemic? This is unlike anything ever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the main thing is just people's need to interact with each other.
Yes.
So not being able to meet together and not being able to greet each other like we normally do. Even as it relates to when you do run into somebody, we're not hugging and
That's
shaking
right.
hands like we normally do.
That's
And
right.
all that is a very conscious change in how we operate. And socially, I think we're suffering because there's a need for that touch. There's a need for that camaraderie. There's a need for that space where people are greeting one another. And so certainly that has been a challenge. The biggest challenge is not being able to gather. And then we have just the technological challenge of that some people who, again, have had to come to grips with technology is the way to go. If you're going to stay up to breast and stay up to speed on what's going on, you got to be able to navigate technology. And so we've actually had to teach some of our seniors on how to get on the Zoom, how to get on your computer, and how to set things up so you can still participate. And I think there's still a lot of people that choose not to just because they just don't want to attempt to make those changes, and that's unfortunate. I think that's one of the bigger challenges. How do we still reach and serve those individuals that are on the Zoom calls and aren't participating on a weekly basis? And so that's one of the challenges. I think even to this day, we're trying to figure out how can we, one, stay in touch with them, but also, two, how can we stay up to speed on what's going on with them if they do need something further than just on Sunday morning, Wednesday night.
Well, I will definitely suggest that as it relates to this being a different time than I have ever experienced in my nearly 79 years now, I do not enjoy the kind of leadership position that you do, and you're attending to today's mental health issues based upon what's happening with, you've got the pandemic, you've got the racial issues, you've got the economic, and I always talk about the elephant in the room and the gorilla in the garage and the rhinoceros in the nursery. My Lord, Wanda and I asked our pastor, Isaac Petrie Sr., at Antioch Missionary Baptist Church in Phoenix when we were in Arizona, about approaching his ministry, and he referred to it, Pastor Brooks, as a burdensome joy. Can you relate to that?
Yeah, and I think I think that certainly, just like life in general, I think you go through phases when it comes to leadership as well. And so, having been pastoring 24 years now, 20 years Anglo and 4 the other, and now we're the Oasis Church. And for people who may not know, we've grown, but I think it does come in phases. And I think at this, not that I'm old, but I'm certainly not a young preacher anymore. Time does bring about a change, and I think it does bring about wisdom that you may not have had in previous years. And so, I think even how you handle the burdens becomes different based on your maturity level and based on your experience. Period. It certainly is a joy to have this position and be called to lead God's people. But navigating this last year, navigating this pandemic has been a burden. We've all had to adjust how we do things. And the biggest adjustment is, I don't think any of us, no matter what school you went to and how many degrees you have, nobody had a class on how to pass through a pandemic. So we've been learning on the fly.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
From each classes. You know,
Absolutely.
Set up my own TV screen and background and make sure the sound is right and the picture is good, and you know, all the things that do all that stuff yourself unless you're fortunate enough to have somebody to help you with all that. A lot of us have to navigate that ourselves. So certainly as months passed, it got easier. We got better at it, but I don't think anybody really could ever understand just the burden that the pastor has. Not only just having to teach and be responsible for our teaching and our preaching, but all the other things that come along with that. The teaching and preaching probably the easy part as far as I'm concerned. Is the pastor and then the practicing.
Yes, sir.
It becomes a burden. Yeah.
I can imagine when I call you, I only need 7 minutes, Pastor. I'm not going to keep you. I'm just going to take a moment. And I don't even think about the 11 people before me who only needed 7 minutes. And our 7 minutes never ends after 7 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
But
so that's normal. That's normal. I think we just kind of expect that from time to time.
Praise God. Now, we're coming to the end of this particular hour on Wave Your Grades, and you have indulged me, which I appreciate so much, in terms of questions I wanted to ask. But two things I would ask of you near the end of the program, and those two things are, one, if it is all right, can those who are listening contact you if they want it for whatever reason, your counsel? And then number two, I do not want to get away without asking Pastor Michael Brooks if there's something you have on your mind that I might not have broached this afternoon.
Sure. Well, sure. You can certainly reach me at any time. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Just Pastor Brooks on Facebook, and it's still Aces Church International. Also, all of our services are virtual Wednesdays at 6:30 and Sunday morning at 10:15. You can also reach me by email. It's just pastorm.brooks@gmail.com. And send me a message, send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Just in line, Mr. Boyd, with just the whole pandemic and how we are navigating this, I think it's important with what's being reported as these new strains of the virus that are starting to hit our country, that we still stay vigilant as relates to practicing social distancing and wearing our masks is extremely concerning me, even how divisive that has been. That just people just will not believe the report, and the fake news has just been, I think, so detrimental to what we've done. I think we could have saved a whole lot of lives had we handled this thing differently.
Yes, sir.
Having said that, going forward, we just need to do better. And so I'm concerned about our elderly. I'm concerned about our kids. My son is right now in his second quarantine.
I'm sorry to hear that.
In contact with kids at school.
Okay.
And so it's still a reality.
Yes,
the other thing is, I would certainly, the experts are saying the only way we can get on the other side of this is people to get fully vaccinated. I'm still on the fence when it comes to that, but I think you need to do what you feel led to do. Certainly for our seniors, who are the most vulnerable, I think, in our population, they need to do it. So I'm encouraging my mother and my father to make sure that they go and get vaccinated as soon as they possibly can. And we'll say that to all of our seniors, make sure you do all you can to get vaccinated so we can get on the other side of this. Other than that, keep trusting God.
Praise
keep
God.
Believing, keep your faith alive. One thing about being virtual, you don't have to go to one church anymore. You can hit 3 or 4 churches.
That's a good point.
On a Sunday morning.
A good point. Yes, sir.
Finding different methods, so that's been encouraging. The number of people who've made it a reach certainly has been encouraging. And just always appreciate your friendship and your professionalism.
Thank you so
your
much.
Confidence you've had in us. So you know you can call us at any time.
God bless you.
We're happy to help you in any way that we possibly can.
And you do, you have, and I look forward to it. I just thank you so very much, and please keep in mind that we will be calling upon you in the near and far future.
No doubt, no doubt.
Now, is it Oasis Missionary Baptist Church, Oasis Baptist Church?
That's either Oasis Oasis Church International. We're kind of getting away from the denomination.
Denominationalism.
We're going to be a non-denominational church.
Oasis.
So it's just the Oasis Church International. Actually, it's going to be located in Raytown once we get back going. 115 East 13th. East 53rd Street, in Raytown, Missouri. So once the pandemic is slowed down,
yes, sir.
We'll look forward to having a grand opening, inviting everybody to come and celebrate with us.
Outstanding. Oasis Church International. Pastor Michael Brooks, thank you so much. God bless you. We will see you in the near future.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too. Pastor Michael Brooks, Oasis Church International, Shepherds, helping Shepherds veteran. Our very special guest today on Wave Your Grades. My name is Carl Boyd. I'm your host every Saturday, 1 until 2 p.m. on KUAW.org, emanating from the W.E.B. Du Bois Learning Center in Kansas City, Missouri. And Louis George Walker, founder, today's producer, engineer. We call on you to do quite a bit, brother Walker. But if a microphone is available to you, Pastor Michael Brooks was saying that you could reach him on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. For those who are interested in all of the programming on KUAW.org, here is Louis George Walker to tell you how you can keep in touch.
Well, thank you, Mr. Boyd. I'm glad to be on here.
I'm not sure I'm hearing you. Go ahead. All right.
Okay. Yeah, let me see.
I know that I was... Okay, now I think.
All right.
There you
go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
That little on-off switch sometimes really tricks you. But no, thank you, Carl. For all of those that are listening, we are glad that you tuned in and hope you enjoyed the Wave Your Grades show and all the other shows that we have on KUAW Radio. Earlier this morning, Pastor Canty, Elry Canty, was on with Wake Up KC. So tune in every Saturday and catch those two shows and others that we have on. And you can tune in a bunch of different ways. If you're listening audio only, go to the TuneIn app on your phone and search KUAW, or you can go to our website, www.kuaw.org. Go there and click on the play button. You can hear us 24/7. You also, if you have a smart speaker, Alexa or Amazon Echo or one of those, you tell it to play KUAW, and it'll play us. And then all of our live shows are visually stimulating shows that we have, so you can see these handsome people like Mr. Carl Boyd that is on right now.
Perfect face for radio.
Yes. But you can pick him up on YouTube, on TuneIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Twitch. You can go. All you have to do is put in KUAW Radio. Now it's a little different on each one. On on YouTube is KUAW Space Radio. On Facebook is KUAW-radio, and on Twitter is KUAW_radio. But if you put in KUAW Radio, we'll pop up. So just look for us. We're broadcasted every day.
All right. Thank you so very much, KUAW.org. This program is sponsored by Students for Boots. That is American students striving for excellence in honor of our troops. And we always give a word of the day to students across the USA. Your Students for Boots message for this day, January 30th. Through warriors' boots and students' books, there runs a common thread. The tie that binds is intelligent minds, keeping our nation ahead. This is Wave Your Grades. My name is Carl Boyd. I am your host Saturdays, 1 until 2 p.m. And today, gracious God and wonderful Wanda, I'm on my way home.